was originally March 18th. Now we're recording. Way to go, Zach. So the deadline was originally March 18th, but with continuing resolution fun with FY24, that deadline has now been moved to April 1st. So if folks are familiar with the process, have had a chance to look at the link, really it's a matter of identifying a project, and we typically say that the ideal price point for any particular project request is $5 million and under. Now that's not a steady 5 million and over has no chance, but generally speaking, a $5 million request is at the kind of the high end of what is generally accepted once a project works its way through the entire process. So really it's a matter of identifying priorities, and if there's one or two projects from any given jurisdiction, if the county were to take something and then an associated city took another one, there'd be opportunities to apply for several things within the cycle. So if folks are familiar with the process, maybe I'll stop there and just see if there's any initial questions on anything that folks may have seen already, trying to work through our process, and then kind of pick it back up or turn it over to Raquel. Okay. Well, if folks are moving along on the
I guess, Rick, could you sort of highlight on when these projects will make the list, and how do we know when they get on the list and if there's a priority to them? Because it seems like in the past when we apply it, it's like, it's like, okay, we've applied, but never gotten really any feedback on where it's ranked or anything.
Sure. So any project that goes through the process, and it starts with each of the congressional offices, and they'll do their own internal review and find the projects that they want to push forward over to the associated committees. That process, by the time a project makes it to committee, we're looking at early summer. I would say sometime in the mid to late summer, we should have an idea of what's coming out of most committees. And then by the time we get into late summer, early fall, we'll start seeing the beginnings of a final draft of an FY25 bill. So, and then in a perfect world, a final bill is signed by September 30th. That appears unlikely this year, so it'll be sometime after that, but still during this calendar year is the ideal spot. So you should start hearing from any of the offices that you applied to sometime during the summer, and it's always it's perfectly fine to reach back out if you want any status updates. You can be as persistent as anybody would like to be in terms of getting any feedback or any status updates on requests. But generally, summertime would be about when we're starting to see things come out of committee, or at least know that they went from the congressional office to the committee.
Keith, can you please just refresh, what was your project proposals that you submitted in the years past?
I think last year we submitted the Columbia Center Boulevard widening project, a railroad crossing study for the downtown area, and then I think we submitted the First Avenue road diet.
Yes. The road diet. Okay.
The road diet. We've got overweight roads over here.
Yes, as we travel through them, we are experiencing them out as well. So Heath, I think that one caveat here for you to think about as you're preparing for an FY25 is to update and refresh your proposal, and to think about the math that needs to be determined in those project proposals. And of course, visiting with both Rick and I specifically on your project proposal will be helpful. So if I may, hi Brian, good to see you on screen. So Raquel, Senator Murray's office, we are not, our FY25 portal is not open at this point in time. I'm not able to indicate when that portal will be open, other than to say that we are still working through the FY24 bills before the committee is prepared to release any insights on FY25. So as Senator, you may recall that Senator Murray did this years ago when we first began the earmark process. We opened up our portal both in program and in congressionally directed spending, so we could do a drill to see what those internal and external needs are. So then when they got to committee, they were capable of identifying what funding and what program and what department needed to be plussed up or plussed down or however. So it's really good that Senator Cantwell is looking at her committees when she is receiving those requests, because that will help guide some other processes on the back end. So Team Murray is really incredibly busy back in DC, both with the FY25, trying to get through the FY24 process, and with fly-in taking place right now. So it's very, very busy. We are taking meetings currently on programs, but we haven't opened our portal yet on programs. And again, the CDS request. So what can we look forward to for FY25? Your guess is as good as mine. So we don't have an idea of what the pocketed funding mechanisms would be, but in years past, we have had, as Rick had said, the $5 million or below. My instructions from in particular training that I have had is show your math. If it's going to be 5 million, 5.7 million, 5.8 million, show your math. The math cannot lie, right? So, and if it's something that you can look at collaboration pieces that can come through state or your tax dollars or some other avenues, you know, demonstrate that in your application as well. And again, for those that are first-time appliers, I really want you to stress on your program statement or your problem statement that you're a first-time applier. And then, of course, Rick and I can take our meetings with you one-offs and give you very specific guidance and support and information that is helpful for you in your application process. Now, I will say that in years past, we have had accounts that are incredibly competitive, incredibly over utilized. And so EDI, for example, is one of those that we get, like, just off the top of my head, I'm gonna say like, say 400 to 500 applications in that bucket alone for Washington State. I want you to realize that you are competing nationwide for the funding once it gets through the gauntlet of your senator's offices or the House's offices. So just realize that the process is cumbersome, but it's fun. It is fun, because our job for the region, right, Rick? It's fun. It's like crazy, insane March Madness fun to wrestle committee and other states and other offices to get the funding back to Washington State. Now, that's not to say we don't get a bottle of Excedrin, because there are moments, but so there was a couple things I wanted to make sure I highlighted here. So Keith, you mentioned you'd like to get some feedback and ranking. Absolutely, we can do that. You dust off your program or your proposal, and in that consultation with our office and Rick's, we can get that detailed information for you. And sometimes I will honestly tell you, it is that problem statement that needs to be honed in better. You cannot confuse a committee member that knows nothing about the communities, okay? Because there's been language before utilized in the problem statements that has really confused the committee. And when they bring it back to us to say what's going on, how's this happening, da, 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 and we can't answer on behalf of the community, we will reach back out to the community and ask for clarification. And if you don't reply to us in 48 hours, it's like a done deal. The spin cycle is already gone and you're out. So we can help you with the feedback. Ranking is kind of a hard thing to do. I should show you sometime our spreadsheet from the last year's, the amount of applications that came in and then the categories that came in and the pool. And it's hard to figure out how the ranking system works, again, because it goes nationwide, not just state. So status, I wanted to help you guys figure out a little timeline here. We are in a strange year because it's an election year. And because we are in an election year, we have two large recesses. We have the month of August where, and I want to say this, when we have a recess, it's an oxymoron. It is the senator is back in state doing extensive work. So it just means that they're not sweltering in DC. They're coming back to state for the entire month to be working in the state. So in-state work in August, and then we will have that again in October. So timeline for this process. I'm not 100% sure because of the wonkiness of all this, but I will say that the offices and the appropriators will do their due diligence to try to get things finalized before a recess, a significant recess. That is probably why they're asking us to block off periods of time in our calendars to not take vacation, at least for our office. I don't know if Rick's, but our office is kind of saying, hold tight. These are some blackout periods. And then they're releasing us on very specific timeframes. So again, we'll have that process again in October. And I've kind of heard that Derek Larson's office, the House has opened up their portal last night, and I see that Ashley's getting ready to jump in. But happy to help from a perspective of what's going on, and I will be sending out to you all here really soon 3 long periods of notices of federal funding. And that's another critical thing, 3 big piles of federal notices of funding. And you may or may not have seen it that I posted recently on LinkedIn, a very critical one that U.S. Department of Labor has opened up an agricultural job readiness to prepare for ag tech. So one of those notices of funding that I will be sending out will have that information, that detail for you as well. So I just know that if talking and on some of my special projects that I'm working on right now for the senator, there are some significant funding mechanisms coming in these notices of funding opportunity. And I am saying that you will probably need to have in your statement, if these apply to you, that you are applying for this federal funding in a NOFO as well to get up there higher in the competitive process. Lots more. I mean, I've only had half a cup of coffee, so just imagine me with 1.5 more. Happy to take questions. If you don't have my work cell phone number, that is 509-654-6684. Just a little FYI too, that we have the Eastern Washington director out of Spokane currently out on personal leave, and I am covering some specific topics for Eastern Washington as well as the Central Washington region. And I still have a fairly new director team on the west side. So I get to cover some overlapping topics too. So it's a busy time right now. Special assignments. I love special assignments.
Looks like we have Brian Malley has his hand raised for a quick question, and we'll take some questions of Raquel, and then we'll turn it over to Ashley to get the perspective from Congressman Newhouse. Go ahead, Brian.
Perfect, thank you. So I guess for Raquel, Rick, and Ashley also, if she's able. So these CDS requests, I know, and on the basis ideals, they all have the same probably criteria as some of the recent federal funding programs. Are the criteria as strict as they are with regards to some of the geographic equity and other things like that that we see in some of the federal programs, or are there other criteria that we should be paying attention to?
So Rick's portal, I don't know what kind of questions they're asking. So Rick, because you're open now, I think that they should be considering your responses first.
Go ahead, Brian, you had more, go ahead.
So I guess what I'm getting at is we've got some projects that are in areas, you know, that may not hit to equity and some of the other criteria that we see so prevalent in the federal program. So we're just kind of getting our projects, I guess, aimed at the right program. Is with regard to the CDS request, are there similar criteria?
Yes, without knowing, you know, which two buckets we're aiming at in terms of a grant versus the CDS and what they could be, you still want to show those, if you're serving if it's service of an underserved community, if it's tied to clean energy, you know, clean energy development. Some of those areas where I think I know where you're thinking in terms of what type of narrative we need, what type of story we need to tell. All of those are going to be pertinent. It always helps to make it stand out over those who don't take that approach. Without knowing the other grant. I think that's kind of a universal standard to a point where if you can show where the biggest bang for your buck is coming from your project, and if it's in helping a traditionally underserved or something you can show in Benton County where the best opportunity is going to be, I think that's definitely a great approach for a narrative.
Yeah, thank you. What I'm getting at is, you know, we've got projects that Kennewick and Richland have projects, you know, more on the active side of things that I don't know if that would ever make for a good CDS request. But then at Benton County, we've got some projects that are out here in areas that are, quite frankly, are a little more affluent, but we've got some real transportation needs that we push forward pieces of these projects in the past. And I just don't seem to hit to the criteria that for equity and any of the disadvantaged areas where we're aimed at. So I'm trying to figure out how to present this project, knowing it's got to compete nationally, and it's just often not going to hit the criteria that are going to make it float to the top.
I think there's a conversation to be had with whatever affiliated city your project might be in within the county, and to say, you know, where does this project that you're focused on fit in the city's plans, because ultimately the county can make its own request versus the city making a request. And then you guys can, if you're doing multiple requests, you rank them internally. If you had 3 you were aiming at for the county, you would want to rank them so we can see that. But if there's a conversation with the affiliated city about prioritizing and rank, because as much as, I mean, and again, nothing's universal, but the thought that any one territory is going to get 4 or 5 projects across the finish line is a challenge. I can't say anything's universal, but if we're trying to get this really large swath of territory, just for Raquel and I in Central Washington, and Ashley too, us prioritizing our regional priority process, we're trying to make sure everyone has an opportunity to get their accomplishments done. So really having a good conversation with the affiliated city about which of these 5 we're looking at, get that priority in there, rank them, apply for as many as you feel necessary. But really, I think having a conversation with the cities to get that priority ranking would be a pretty critical conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, that you know, I think Benton County, we have a difficult time standing up a project that will compete against the cities. And I think, you know, and from my own perspective, I think that joint project might, though I don't think anyone's liable to run with it because they have other priorities. So anyhow, thank you for that answer. That helps me get things framed up.
So Brian,
You bet.
Yes.
So because I'm not familiar, I mean, you've already probably had a conversation with Rick and love to visit with you on this, but I just want to throw this back out there for you that you indicated that the transportation is a link to other avenues to more affluent, right? So the more affluent is hospitals, education, infrastructure, PUDs, right? Counseling services. So remember, Brian, we've talked numerous times about ladders of opportunity, right? So intersecting to those ladders. So just because they're low socioeconomic now, they're not having access to affluent, that is your conduit to getting ladders of opportunity to build up, right? It's the connectivity pieces that you need to chat about.
Okay. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Yes, you're right. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, and I
And
think
then-
I think that. Oh, go ahead, Rick.
No, I'm sorry. And I think about what I said in terms of rankings and regional priorities and everything. I think there's definitely you need to have that conversation needs to be there because the cities can help the counties with their efforts and vice versa. But in terms of everyone kind of being on the same page for what the regional approach would be, would help with that. I mean, ideally, if we're for Raquel and Ashley and I, we're all looking at the entire Central Washington, and then our counterparts in Spokane and these other parts of the state for us are all kind of doing the same thing. So knowing that we can't do unlimited projects, I think having those conversations about where's the biggest need, and then but that's not saying don't apply for everything you want to try for. With the bandwidth and staffing is there, apply. But having that understanding and letting the city benefit the county and vice versa, and letters of support and the rest of it, are all really important pieces. Just I think having a regional idea of this is what we should be aiming for, here's the priorities, is a really good conversation.
I agree. Thank you. In the end, I think that's exactly it. And understanding what, as a region, we're pushing forward into this process, because none of us have time to submit things that we just know don't stand a chance. So thank you again.
Yeah, and I think speaking to just not only CDS grants, but grants all around, whether they're state, federal, generic NOFOs, finding that regional connection, whether it's city to city, it's special district like library district, or port to a city or a county. And then Raquel speaks, and we talked about this in January too, finding that conduit, that the specific location of your project may not be in a certain area, but it may bridge certain areas, whether it's disadvantaged to advantaged, or getting agricultural goods to a trade route, and trying to find that bigger picture. Lee from City of Connell has had his hand raised for a little bit, so we'll go to him next.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, Raquel, so as far as I know, this would be our first ask, and so we kind of want to get this right. In your opinion, I mean, would it be advantageous for us to propose several projects rather than just one, with varying funding requests? Because at the moment we do have one big project we'd love to get done, but if it would help us get funding, it would help us in this process that, if we get denied one, maybe we should have several others, in line just in case.
So Connell has come up in like 5 or 7 of my regional conversations recently. So I did return a phone call, and I'd love to visit and talk specifically about some avenues for Connell. So the historic building, revitalization of downtown, small business sector, infrastructure and rail, transformers. I mean, so holistically, again, it comes back down to, yes, I want you to apply because you have not applied before. So you theoretically, Connell, you were the unicorn in the room. So you have not been served by the federal government in an extended period of time. You have been overlooked. So you are the underdog that needs to be looked at. So, because that is one of the critical questions we will be asked is, has this community received federal funds before? Are they being served by the federal government? Are the taxpayers coming back to that community, and are they being utilized in that community? And if we answer, golly gee Whitakers, no, I don't think so. We have to really look at you. So you're the unicorn. Not to say either, though, that folks that are in the room right now too, that have received federal funds, that they're not eligible because they're also unique to a category as well. So based upon guidelines from the committee, which we can't really speak to just yet, yes, you should just completely holistically apply. And we need to talk about specifically what you will or won't do. And give you some, what we know, what we're capable of sharing with you, to be that way. And for those that are on here, I mean, Ashley and Rick know that I am super, super competitive. I take my training really serious when the appropriators sit down and say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're doing, this is like, help us get through. Last year, behind the scenes, because we kind of mentioned a little bit about, the processing, I refer to our process like Shark Tank and sausage making. So there is like a lot of details that go behind the scenes that come into like a wrestling match with other committee members. And when I say I'm competitive, that means that I go toe to toe with some of the committee members or the appropriators when they ask me questions via email or phone or about the critical mass needs. And the work that you all do to raise the poverty level occurring in the community really helps us. The more you collaborate with the offices, the more details we can get to the committee and we can share that. So it goes through Shark Tank, sausage making, Shark Tank, sausage making, Shark Tank, sausage making, announcement. And we love that part, right? We love that part. We love that part, bringing it back to the community, back the taxpayers' dollars, back to the state, to the region. And holistically, if you really wanted to do giggles and laughs, holistically, you could go down and you could pull congressionally directed and community finance or community, whatever the House calls it. You could go historically look to see what has gotten through the sausage making and the Shark Tank to see what has been funded and what the pocketed amounts are. But again, I want you to remember to show your math. Don't just say we need 7.3 million and not have that delineated fairly in the marketing or in the process of financing it or asking or making the request. And remember, please remember this. Some committees require a match.
Yeah.
And American Rescue Plan dollars, ARPA funds, is federal funds. It is not a match.
Great point
Yeah,
there, and
well-
especially on the ARPA dollars too. Really appreciate the input there. Go ahead, Lee.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, and I appreciate that, and we will certainly be in touch because I'm sure we will have plenty of questions.
All right.
So the other thing too is that we will be asking, I think we will be asking, have you expended all of your ARPA funds as well as part of a criteria? So just be prepared for some tough questions sometimes.
Sure, okay.
Tough questions leads to successful projects, though. Ashley, from Congressman Newhouse's office, you joined us. Any news on CDS from Congressman Newhouse and the process coming up? Anything that you would like to present or add?
Yeah. Hey, hello, everyone. Zach, thank you for putting this together. And I do apologize for joining a little bit late, but it sounds like Rick and Raquel will have made what I have to give you pretty easy. They may have done the heavy lifting, and they all have great advice and good experience. So thank you both for that. In terms of the update from Congressman Newhouse's office, the portal in the House has not been opened yet, and we have not yet been given criteria for what that will be. However, it does sound like Rick and Raquel shared something that is similar to what I what I'm going to say and what we have been telling folks when they call, and that is that the criteria, they're slightly different every year. We don't always know what they're going to be, but that in general, it's very similar. Broadly, it's very similar. So, I tend to tell people that, if you find those I love that opportunity ladder that Raquel talked about, and you find that nexus between how federal dollars are going to help stimulate the local community and the partnership aspect of it. Then as you start to flesh those things out, when the portal does open, it makes it very easy to just sort of plug and play, copy paste. Maybe you have to get a number here or answer this question you hadn't thought to go look up the answer to. But for the most part, if you sort of get all your information together to outline, to tell the story and account for all the dollars, like Raquel said, not just a map and that you need, 70,000, but that this is what it's going to go towards, and this is the timeline, then it's not as overwhelming or stressful as it may feel like right now.
Very good. Thank you, Ashley. I kind of have a question here because I think we talk a lot about infrastructure, roadway, utility projects, but what other projects? We do have Mid-Columbia Libraries here. We do have, I know that some of the cities have been successful in building, like capital buildings, programs, that sort of thing. What other processes or what other projects could people submit for CDS and beyond like your typical road and infrastructure?
One that I've enjoyed seeing and one that's worked in the past are programmatic opportunities. And I use Central Washington University as an example. I don't know if it might be applicable to the libraries, but they have their agribusiness certificate program, and they made a request for additional funding to help expand it. They've consulted with their stakeholders, the farms and the agriculture businesses in the area, and those folks told Central, this is what we need for our future workforce. So they were able to make a successful pitch a couple of years ago that was just geared towards programmatic spending for supplies and materials and developing curriculum. And I think that could be something that the library could look at as a thought if there was an educational piece someplace. That's probably the first one that comes to mind. I'm trying to think of what else would be applicable here. Transportation we touched on, education. I am certain if I sat here for a minute, I'd come up with some more ideas. But
Sure.
right now, for folks on the call, I think, and if it's a expansion of a particular building or needing to relocate, it's funny, there's one caveat in there with new construction. Some accounts allow new construction, some accounts do not allow new construction. So there's a bunch of different ways folks can go. But there's Department of Justice opportunities, energy opportunities. There's a lot there just in terms of number of accounts that are possible. But yeah, I think that's where I'm at the moment. If I come up with another one that would make sense, I'll jump back in.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Raquel, Ashley, go ahead.
So if we're looking at the library, and I'm only gonna, so there has been some critical funding that has taken place for some regional libraries. And it's gotten to, it wasn't to construct a facility, it was for tangible items to go in the facility. So they received like reader boards, laptops, Verizon sticks for bandwidth, to be able to do bandwidth. There was like pavements, there was reading nooks. So there's caveats here, and that would be under Labor, Health and Human Services and the education program if it is a category that is open. Mm-hmm. So again, we need to have the committee and the guidance given. Senator Cantwell's got last year's information out. It may be what the committees have decided and the appropriators have decided, but again, they're currently in negotiation. So the best thing is to talk through with Rick, Ashley, myself, what your project proposal will be, and we'll kind of help you a little bit tailor things down. But Save the Children, for example, Save the Children made an application in FY22, and they funded literacy in partnership with the Collective Impact with Toppenish, Grandview, Sunnyside, the ESD 105. So they had really strong collaborative partners. and that they could showcase how they were reaching families. So, and early literacy. So there are avenues. So again, just talking through your project proposal with the offices to help you narrow down better for you.
And I think that speaks to the resource. I mean, anything, you know, we talk with public facilities districts, which may not, you know, they're not an official member of the Council of Governments, but they do a lot of work with our cities and counties. There's shared facilities with cities and counties, and I think collaboration is certainly key as well. But yeah, anything that you can ask any of our representatives here, you know, is just great for conversation. It's that I think this program, you could say, is any idea, throw it out there and see if it fits. Anything to add from the congressman's perspective, Ashley?
You know, similar to Rick, I was just sitting here running through things, and I'm sure when we hang up, I'll think of others, but there's always those unique ones that sort of stand out, and you read it and you go, oh, I never thought of applying for that. So, you know, just to reiterate, throw it at the wall, see if it sticks. If you have a really unique idea, call one of the three of us, and we can pretty quickly either say, oh, that's a great idea, I think you should tinker with it this way and this way so that it'll fit the ask. And yeah, aim high.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ashley. Sarah, you were unmuted for a moment. Did you have a question?
No, I just want to say thanks, Zach, for throwing that question out there, and I appreciate the feedback, and it's certainly planted some seeds. I'm not sure we have the bandwidth or the capacity to put something together that's thoughtful and collaborative this year, but certainly for future years. So thank you for that.
Well,
sure.
actually, Sarah, that's why it's critical to visit with the offices. I mean, when you look at the portal, you'll see this. To me, it's one of the sweetest ever grant applications to apply for, because when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, there's only like 6 to 10 questions, and they're not even hard questions. The hardest thing, I think, to fit, really, I'm a former grant writer. So I used to I worked for the public education system, and I had a building administrator and a superintendent that said, you get this amount of money, and if you want more than that kind of money, you need to write grants to get it for your kiddos. So I wrote grants for my kiddos and was successful with Microsoft and the Gates and Millennium Foundation, and some others. So when I look at those grants and when I look at NOFOs for federal funding and state funding in the past, I was like, those are daunting. But the earmark, the congressionally directed spending is so sweet. I mean, the hardest thing to do is to quickly talk to your collaborative partners and get letter supports for a project and identify what project you want to have, and writing a problem statement that captivates and identifies with the committees on first glance. So what's the problem? The problem is literacy is at an all-time low. The community has impacted, we'd like to, and we're seeking $2 million to do this. I mean, that's your problem statement, right? It's got to captivate stuff. So in transportation conversations, the road diet, First Ave road diet. So catchy titles for projects really keep the committee engrossed in the project proposal. So when it says, not to pick on, well, I guess I am picking on road, this is Grant County, Road 0 Southwest intersection B. What the heck is that, right? So it confuses, they're laughing because it does confuse you. I mean, I can tell you straight up when they said First Ave road diet. Okay, I remember that project proposal. Actually, if they just said road diet, Apple Capitol Loop, Fruity Pebbles, Union Gap Beltway. I mean, these are transportation folks. Union Gap, Friends of the Library, Save the Children, literacy component. I mean, these were catchy title for the project proposal, helps the committee, and a nice succinct 500 words or less project proposal problem statement helps. And again, 6 to 10 questions. It's really not that daunting in comparison to other applications for federal funding.
Awesome. Great input, Raquel. Anything else? Any other questions on CDS? Anything to add for the good of anything that we're missing? Is there anything confusing out there?
So I do want to say a couple little wacky doodle things. So one is you need to make sure that if you're putting in for transportation, that it showcases on a regional plan and a state plan. Then if you're doing a water project, that it's on ecology's list. And then because we will be looking, we do look at public meeting information and collaborators. So these are all like other areas that you need to be focusing on as well. So if you have a website, so like the libraries, for example, has a website and they're doing, they're showcasing the project proposal, or this is an ongoing process, put that in your application, that there is community collaboration on our website, and here it is. I mean, make sure that if you are discussing this in the public, that there is a link somewhere saying this is a public interest.
Definitely. And I also want to highlight, you speak to regional and state plans as well. You know, the COG does have our community economic development strategy, our CEDS document, which is for EDA funding primarily, to be funneled down for infrastructure, transportation, any other projects that could be conducive to job creation, business attraction. But if you do have a transportation project, reach out to me and make sure that's in the CEDS, or we can include it. We're continually updating our CEDS document. And we're tying that to community economic development goals, and that can certainly help bolster that. Hey, it's a part of our regional plan for Benton and Franklin counties, that sort of thing. So much like with all of our esteemed congressional staff representatives, you know, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call or schedule a meeting, and we can talk about, you know, any ideas and how we can incorporate that into our regional document to help with any applications as well.
So Zach, that also goes to the MyTri 2030 document as well. So if it's in the MyTri 2030, if it's in an educational plan with the school district, if it's in a family plan or health plan, make sure you identify that as in your request.
Yep.
I believe, Rick, Senator Cantwell has a website link there in her documentation. And I know we do as well. I don't know about the House, but I'm assuming that since that was there before, it should stay here again. So again, and we also, that's the other thing that they will ask, the committee has asked me before, have you heard this being discussed in a community meeting? And I've said, I don't know. They'll say, I don't know. And if I don't know about it, that's not a good thing. Because our job is to protect your interest in your proposal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've had Apple Capital Loop folks say, hey, we're in the news, watch this here. Hey, we're going to give a press release, watch this here. Hey, can you come? Hey, this is happening tonight. Oh, by the way, short notice, but. So we got to hear it. I pop in, I just need to hear bits and pieces, and then I can pop out of a meeting. Right, Rick? I'm like the bird, just buzzing in and out.
That's how we roll these days. No, I think the biggest thing I can emphasize right now with our portal being up, two things. One is, if any, most of you I know, I at least sent it to Zach, and I know I had a massive email thread going out for it. The links that went out had the disclaimers on there with any potential edits or adjustments that could happen between now and the end of the process, where a category could go away. There's a balance there between that and having time and having as much opportunity to put together projects and ask questions. And that goes to all three offices. I mean, everyone's able to reach out and ask questions in this process at any point. With ours being open and having a deadline, I really want to emphasize that if there's any questions, any concerns about does this fit, can this work, are we eligible, anything like that, definitely connect with all of us. I'll say me because we have the deadline, but when the other two offices are rolling, make sure you have that, even if it's a 5 to 10 minute conversation. And if it needs to be longer, let's do it. But I really want to make sure that all questions are answered and that we give the best chance for success in this really competitive process.
So that's the other caveat here is you can ask us questions at well, at least our office. I can give you as much guidance and support and help in categories here. The moment you send it in, it's hands off. It goes through spin cycle. So this is your lifeline. This is the phone a friend time when you're in the process.
I'm keeping that one, Raquel. Using that one.
Yeah,
Phone a
yeah,
friend.
same for us too. Once it's in, it's in.
Yeah.
Right. There's no going back. It's not, it's done, and it goes through the bath, and it gets washed, and it's like, but one other thing though, is I believe we all have 2 to 3 letters of support for your project, your proposal. That is good. That's helpful. It doesn't mean you don't have to get 20 or 50. I mean, as much as you collaborate pieces there and you have that, we'll accept them. Keep in mind, to have a successful application, you need to have bare minimum 3. If you end up with, ungodly 20 letters of support, please batch them and put them into a PDF and upload them into the system. If they don't go into the system, send them to us directly so we can get them loaded in. Now, in years past, I've let the computer system send me your project proposal. And when I get them, I get this Excel spreadsheet, and it's in like 8 font, and I'm trying to read through stuff. Rick, Ashley, do you guys get the same thing? Yeah, that's why I'm in bifocals. So
Yep.
it's really hard. So for me, when I talk with you, I do I call it a call sheet. So I actually match my call sheet to what comes through in the portal. And the first thing that they ask us again is, did they communicate with you their project? And if you're not on my call sheets and you've submitted, you already didn't meet the criteria because you didn't check in with the regional director to talk about the project proposal. So then I have to figure out how to get you back into the cycle. Did I hear this in a community meeting? So I can keep you in the running? And that makes it harder for me, but I do it. But again, pre-planning, pre-conversation, pre-collaboration, I cannot stress that near enough.
Yeah, I'm seeing, I'm going to add it to the chat, but this whole meeting is brought to you by the letter C. It's congressional direct spending, it's collaboration early, it's communicate early and often, it's compelling statements, it's community involvement, it's all of that.
That's amazing. I do have to just on that, I would say that we don't have that similar criteria of did they reach out and chat with us. That's not to say that, yes, please do call me, ask questions. We want to help. We want to be that first line of help. Obviously, the region that we deal with, even though it's smaller than the whole state that the 2 senators deal with, we also, our staffs are significantly smaller than the staffs that the senators have. And it doesn't mean that we care about you less, but sometimes we can be stretched pretty thin. So if another partner at the city is saying, hey, or, whomever you're speaking with, and they're saying, hey, I want to apply for this CDS, and maybe they've done it before, or they know what they're doing, I would say, don't feel like you have to tell them, oh, make sure you check in with Congressman Newhouse's office first. And you certainly can. A phone call would be a great heads up. But I don't ever want anyone to feel, at least from our office, this is just me speaking, that because they didn't check in with us first, that it's not going to be an excellent submission, and that they are going to be further down in the running. Because sometimes it makes it hard for us to help everyone if we get hundreds and hundreds of calls. But that's just our perspective. that's never to dissuade you from calling. Please call. I'll always answer if I can.
Good segue there, Ashley, because right now, previously before you popped in, this is fly-in season back in DC, right? So, cities, commissions are all flying back in and they're pitching projects and program funding right now to the offices. So when they go back east and they're talking to policy, they've reached out to our policy team and then they circle back for me to do follow-up. So there is that project connection in some cases taking place. It's just if it's a surprise project, like a surprise project that just comes out of nowhere, that's when we have to figure those things out.
I think that's the perfect way to say it, Raquel, is because that is something too, is our staff in DC and our staff in district, we're all talking to each other 45 times a day. And so, yeah, if your boss or someone from your team has met with folks in DC, there's a good chance that we're all on the same page and we know about it. So as long as someone has heard of this idea somewhere, then you're good.
Perfect. Any other questions? Anything to add? A lot of information, but it seems like we've got really good similar processes. We have a lot of our team willing to help. So
Here,
go ahead, Heath.
Raquel, you mentioned with our support letters and stuff, which we've had in the past, we're going to be submitting projects that we submitted last year and I think the year before. And we do have those support letters. Do we need to update those or so to have the current year on them? Okay.
At least within the last 6 months, if you have them. I mean, they just like to see them within that bandwidth. So if it was a letter in 2022 and you've got current letters in 2024, I mean, the outliner is not going to be bad, but if all 3 of them are 2022, that might be questionable.
Definitely. All right. Well, a lot of information. So we really appreciate the contributions, the questions, the collaboration this morning, and appreciate the time on CDS. So from BFCOG's perspective, we'll be going through. I'm waiting with bated breath the NOFO batch from you, Raquel. The three, yeah. So we're gonna set aside some time and make sure that we distill those down into applicable NOFOs for our member communities and our partners out there. But we'll also send the entire batch out as well. Like you said, communicate often. So even if you get something from Rick or Ashley or Raquel, I will double up and send that out as well. And more than happy to answer any questions from the COGS perspective. If there's regional partnering opportunities that we see out there, we're here to help as well. And we're here to help with letters of support and anything that you need too. So
Zach, do you still have or Michelle, do you still have the federal fund manual that I sent around about 2 years ago about commingling of funding? It was a resource that I think I only sent it out to, I sent it out, I think I might have sent it out to everybody. So it's a rule handbook that identifies ways to do your match. It's a braiding of federal funds and mechanisms.
I do not recall. I recall the big master list of all the IIJA possible funding opportunities, but not that one in particular.
Okay, and then, so I'll try to dig for that. And then there's the other one that I think is really an important one to talk about for infrastructure. So it's the Department of Commerce and U.S. Department of Transportation. It's the identifiers of where critical investments have been going over the last couple of years so that you could figure out where they're not going and identify. Is that helpful, Brian? Keith?
Point taken.
Trying to be helpful without being, too obvious.
Yeah, we'll be happy to see what we can find on the handbooks and any other sources too. So if you want to get them to me, I can get them out to the team.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, we had an hour and a half scheduled. We are right at an hour. So, unless there's any other topics of the day, we appreciate everyone for attending our first Small City Summit of 2024. We do have our Congressional and Legislative Connection meeting coming up with the COG on March 20th. This is where we will have signups for 4 meetings of a half hour each. And we do have our esteemed representatives have accepted or they can be there when they're available. We will also be inviting our state legislative team now that the session is wrapping up in Olympia this week. We do have some responses there. So looking to send out those invites, keep an eye on your email. If you want to sign up for a half hour meeting, we host them at BFCOG. The personal collaboration is great for conversation. Sometimes they blend and we get some cross-regional conversation as well. We can also set up a hybrid meeting too, if that is more acceptable for your schedules. And we're looking forward to continuing the connection and the conversations. And I think by March 20th, there might be some additional details out on CDS. It's also an opportunity to talk about any projects you currently have ongoing with federal and state funding, any issues or opportunities that you've identified through that. And it's a really great program. So we want to keep everyone on the call on the lookout for those signups, and looking forward to having everyone there. And we really appreciate everyone for joining the meeting today too. And appreciate the regional collaboration to make this this is my pitch, the best part of Washington State. So
Zach, what would be helpful for the March 20th is if the state legislators had any, what do they call it? Their own funding mechanisms to any of these project proposals. It would be super helpful to have ahead of time. Earmark. Well, what does the state call them, Ashley?
The allocations from the 3 budgets.
yeah.
That would be helpful to know because honestly, if you can get those allocation identified that are going out into the community and looking at how those could be state dollars can be impactful or utilized in project proposals would be like super helpful when you're writing your proposal.
Yeah, and I know that compromise budget came out yesterday or 2 days ago. So I was going through that for Benton and Franklin County, and I think there's a lot of applicability there. So we'll brief our teams that sign up for the meeting to have that information ahead of time, and any state legislator that is able to join us, we'll have that ahead of time as well, and really just try to prime that conversation to make the most of each meeting.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your help on that, Raquel. That was a great addition, and I made a note of that. So, all right, we appreciate everyone's time. If there's any questions, feel free to send an email to any one of us. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Zach. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.